everyone, welcome back to our channel. We are the Skivers, a family of 5. If you are new here, we have 3 little boys. Mason, say hi Mace.
Hi.
And Maddox, say hi Maddox. Or not. And baby Cole. So stick around, hope you enjoy our video and hope it helps some of you guys out. Mace, what do you say, Mace?
Daz.
Subscribe to our channel to keep up with the Skivers. So, yeah, keep on watching. So I'm back. If you hear the fan in the background, sorry, it's a little warm in here. Gotta get that going. Baby Cole's taking a nap behind me, so I'm trying to be a little bit quiet. The 2 boys are in school right now. It's their last day of summer school. So I kind of wanted to film this without them getting all crazy, because that's typical around here. So if you haven't watched our previous videos, our 2 older boys, Mason and Maddox, are both on the autism spectrum. And I made a video previously that kind of just went into a little bit about how, you know, people react, or the questions that we get when we first tell family and friends that, you know, the boys are on the spectrum. And I didn't go too in depth, so I wanted to go a little more into detail about our diagnosis journey and what led us to where we are today. So I will start off with Mason. Mason was born September 17th, 2013. And Mason, I'd say, was a pretty, you know, typical baby. He was very happy. He hit all of his milestones the way that he was supposed to be. He, you know, sat up on his own at 3 months. I think he rolled over at like 5, started crawling at like 6 months. And then he started walking about 2 weeks before he turned 1 year old. And I found out I was pregnant with Maddox, our middle child, when Mason was 3 months old. So my pregnancies were pretty rough, and I'd say, you know, Mason was probably around 7 or 8 months. As I was getting further along in my second pregnancy, I would get really, really tired. I remember, which probably should have been my first sign, there would be times where Mason would wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I was exhausted. So I would give him the tablet with Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and, you know, sit him next to me so I could lay there for an extra half hour. And I'm sure I'm gonna get a bunch of comments about giving the baby the iPad, but I don't need that. I did, you know, what I had to do to survive at that moment, because it was rough. With that being said, iPads and tablets do not cause autism. Technology does not cause autism. In my family, we believe that autism is genetic. That's our opinion. Those are our beliefs. You know, my younger brother has autism. My children have autism. I have a cousin that is on the spectrum. My mom has cousins that have kids that are on the spectrum. We believe it runs in our family. So Mason was about 8 months and he would just completely zone out. I don't know too many 8-month-old babies that you give them the iPad and they'll just sit there. And just sit there and stare at it and not really care about too much. So Mason was about 9 months old, and when he started pulling himself up to stand, and he would stand up, pull himself up on the TV stand and watch TV, super close to the TV. And I remember one day he pulled himself up and he was kind of dancing, and then as I'm watching him, he started to get really excited and he started flapping his arms. If you don't know too much about autism, the hand flapping, repetitive movement like that, it's a typical behavior of someone on the spectrum. And that was probably the first time I kind of was like, is that what I think it is? I remember mentioning it to a couple family members, and they were just like, no, I don't think that's what's going on. He's just a baby. That's just how he's reacting. So I was like, oh, okay, sure. And as he was, getting a little bit older, I noticed that he didn't always respond to his name when his name was called. He wouldn't always turn and look. The next thing that I noticed with Mason was the vacuum. He was terrified of the vacuum. Anytime, even just pulling it out of the closet, the moment he saw it, he would freak out. He couldn't handle the sound of the vacuum. So at that time, we were living in an apartment with my brother, and if I wanted to vacuum the house, I had to have him go in the room with my brother and close the door. He couldn't be anywhere near it. And then after that, we went to Disneyland. Mason was a little over a year, and I remember bringing him into the bathroom to change his diaper. And inside Disneyland, a lot of the bathrooms have hand dryers. And the minute it went off, he freaked out, tried to stand up, claw up on me. It was screaming. It was a disaster. So after that, I had to either have my sister-in-law come in with me and hold his ears while I was changing him, or we would just change him in his stroller out in the middle of the park. And so the hypersensitivity to sound was a really big thing. We had to get him headphones. Fireworks, sudden loud noises, the hand dryers, being on the tram at Disneyland with the speakers, it was a no-go for him. That's when I really started to notice, I think I know what's going on. And I remember mentioning it to my husband, who, as you can see, is not here. But I did talk to him, and he did kind of give me the okay to talk about, his feelings and how it was at that time, what we were going through. And I remember mentioning it to Jeffrey, I think Mason has autism. And right away, he was like, no, he's fine. My kid's fine. There's nothing wrong with him. And it's okay. That's okay that was his reaction. I think because of growing up, with my brother, just family members with different disabilities, it was normal for me. So I never really experienced that stages of grief that they talk about, when parents find out that their children have special needs. And my husband was a little bit different, and that's okay. And in the beginning, it was denial, big time. So I mentioned it to my mother, because obviously, she would understand, and she said she could see it. There were little things that she could see. Then the next sort of things that I started noticing about Mason, when he hit 2, he started, you could tell that his language was super delayed. He didn't talk as much as other children his age, and I'm a big firm believer that you should not compare children. You don't compare kids to each other. I get a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of people that, they do that quite often, and, your kid's doing this and my kid's not doing that, or he does that, my kid doesn't do that, why is my kid not doing that yet, or my kid does this and your kid doesn't do that. You shouldn't compare children. Every child develops at their own rate. But with that being said, you do kind of get a baseline of where your child should be. And Mason's speech definitely was not where it was supposed to be. He said like mama and dada and Mimi and papa, really basic stuff, but he didn't talk much more than that. And then as he hit 2, he started getting really picky with food, a very picky eater, and he started developing a lot of sensory issues. He would only like crunchy textured foods, so if they loved Eggo waffles, but if the waffle was not crunchy, He wasn't having it. No, no thank you. He would gag. He was really big on, he didn't like being wet. The minute he got wet, like he could take a shower and that stuff, that was fine. It's like, because he knew he was supposed to be wet. But if he was, you know, drinking a water and the water spilled on him, it was over after that. He needed to change his shirt right away. You know, he needed to dry off. He would scream, he would freak out. He didn't like being dirty, and he didn't like being sticky. If he felt like he was sticky, he needed to have his hands cleaned right away. Those were, you know, some of the big things. And Mason also, I could tell one day he was really, really upset and kind of flustered. So I started giving him deep pressure squeezes, because that's some of the things that I learned working with the kids. And instantly it made him feel better. And after that, I had taught him, like, you know, when you're upset, to ask for big squeeze, big squeeze. So those were some things. Mason would also stim a lot. And if you don't know what stimming is, it's a way for them to kind of release the energy that they have. So he would take things like a little toy, and he would just look at it and stare at it and squeeze and tense up, lock his jaw, and really, really focus in on it. And that's not a typical behavior of a, you know, typical child. That's a typical behavior of someone on the spectrum. So, as you know, after he got over 2, that's when my mom told me, you know, you need to go to San Andreas Regional Center. You need to get him assessed, you know, do early start. And I don't know why I kept putting it off and putting it off, but, you know, in that moment, I guess maybe I wasn't ready mentally to have him assessed. I wasn't quite there, even though, you know, I had accepted, you know, whatever was going to happen was going to happen. I wasn't quite ready for him to have that label. So it wasn't until he hit 3 years old that I was like, okay, you know what, at this point we can just go straight through with the school district. We didn't have to go through early start and all that. And for me, I was a little more comfortable going through the school district because I had worked there. I knew the people, I kind of knew what to expect, and, you know, all that process. So Mason had his assessment through the school district in February of 2017, and, you know, we met back, had his follow-up, and sure enough, he qualified for the autism category. And Mason started school in April of last year. So Mason's only officially been in school for a little over a year, and he's already made such big progress. And I'm so excited to see where he's gonna go. You know, today's his last day of preschool. He starts TK in the fall, and I'm really excited about that. Moving on to Maddox. Maddox was born the day before Mason turned 1. So they are September 16 and September 17. My 2 older children are 364 days apart, which is crazy. Maddox growing up was a little bit different than Mason. You know, just like Mace, he hit all of his milestones the way he was supposed to. He walked a little bit earlier than Mace. He walked at around 10 and a half, 11 months. And I'd say he was a really typical child. We thought he was a typical child. But Maddox was very hyperactive. And, you know, he wouldn't always listen when we told him stuff. So we just thought he was being a typical, you know, terrible 2 toddler. We would call him our Sour Patch Kid because one minute he'd be a little turd and the next minute he'd be super sweet and lovable. And it wasn't until Maddox started hitting 2 that we really noticed his speech delay. He had a really big speech delay, and I wasn't sure if it was because, you know, he had Mason to model things, and so we had decided to go through Kaiser to do a speech assessment, because speech services are pretty expensive, so we figured, you know, if he qualified, we could go through insurance to get him that extra speech. I took him in, me and him went in, and we did his speech assessment, and when we were in there, the therapist was like, you know, you should have an autism assessment done for him. And I was kind of like, really? You think so? And there were certain things that I kind of had noticed that Maddox had started doing, but I wasn't sure if they were learned behaviors from Mason or if he was actually feeling that way. Maddox would line up the toys, and he started developing those sensory issues just like Mace, where he didn't like being wet, he didn't like being dirty, didn't like being sticky, and the crunchy texture, you know, those were things that were similar to what Mason was doing. So I thought maybe it was just a learned behavior. But, you know, I went ahead and I took her advice. We put in for a, you know, autism assessment through Kaiser, and at that time actually I had her put in the referral for both boys so that we could get Mason that extra help as well, because his was just an educational diagnosis, so we also wanted that medical diagnosis. When I went in there with Maddox, it was about like a 4-hour process, and they're really quick. At the end of the session, they tell you your results, like this is what we have, this is what we see. And sure enough, Maddox qualified for the autism category. And when she was reading me back the results and talking to me, there was a lot of things that they had picked up on that I hadn't even paid attention to. And, you know, I felt really bad because I think since, you know, Mason's signs and symptoms, as you will, were a lot more noticeable. So we paid a lot more extra attention to Mason. And then we just had a new baby. We had baby Cole. So I feel like they were getting our extra attention, and Maddox kind of got lost in the middle of it all. And I wasn't picking up on the things that I should have been picking up on, especially because I had worked in the district. I knew of all these things, little behaviors, but I completely forgot about them. Like with Maddox, he did a lot of echolalia, so it's kind of where you repeat back things. For example, when we would ask him a question, he would repeat back part of the question. So if you asked him, Maddox, do you want more toys? He would just say, more toys, or toys, instead of saying yes or no. And with Maddox, part of his sensory is he likes being upside down. He's always sitting on his head watching TV upside down, and you know, little things like that. As he's gotten a little bit older, he now does, you know, the sensitivity to flushing the toilet. He doesn't like that, and like I said, he's very hyperactive. There was something my mom always said when I was younger, and it was, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And I never understood that growing up until I got older, and now, because that's exactly how it is in my household. My children are two totally different parts of the spectrum. They have completely different needs. Yes, some things are similar, but a lot of their stuff is different. And, you know, their sensory issues are different, their needs are different, their wants are different, and there are no two people on the spectrum that are alike. None of them are ever going to be identical. They may have similarities, but they're not identical. So, you know, with the two boys, it's a learning process, because one thing can work for Mason and it might not work for Maddox. Behavior-wise, handling one thing, it's not going to work with the other one. And that's okay. And I'm very grateful that God gave me these two little boys. It's definitely a blessing in disguise. Some people may not think that, but I totally do. They test me and teach me every single day, and they make us stronger and make life a lot more interesting. You know, now where we're at, we've had some time to, you know, process everything, and the boys have been in school for a little while, and me and my husband have gotten to a place where obviously we accept who they are and how things are going to be, and you know what, if you don't like it, deuces, peace out. You know, our kids are going to come first, and we just want to get them the help and everything that they need. So I hope that this video, you know, helped you guys out. Like I said, some of the big signs to look for, at least with our kids, was, you know, the hypersensitivity to sound, the sensory issues, the being wet, being sticky, being dirty, lack of eye contact, not really responding to their names being called, lining up of toys or objects is a big thing, the flapping, stimming, the deep pressure squeezes, speech delays. These are all things that can be considered autistic behaviors. You know, if you see some of those things, talk to your doctor about it, or, you know, talk to somebody. I'm glad that, you know, the boys have their diagnosis, because now we could get them the services that they needed to thrive. And this is only the beginning. Maddox has only been in school since March, and it's now July, and he's doing so well. He talks so much, and his speech is getting clearer. And Mason, geez, that guy, we can have a full-on conversation, and you can understand everything that he's saying, and it's great. And socially, they're doing so much better than they were a year or two ago, and I can't wait for the future and see all the progress that they make. Like I said, it's definitely a learning experience, and as we go, we grow. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you want to see more and keep up with the Skivers, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. And until next time, we'll see you guys later. Bye.